In 2012, and if you've been on... There was a weird noise just now. Okay. So the next book is audiobook, and that is Iron and Hoping to Robert by Robert Heinlein. Hey guys, it's Kelly here again and welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to another bookish video. For this one I've prepared basically a rapid wrap-up, and what that is I am going to be quickly wrapping up all of the books that I read in 2018 and giving you a very tiny review of what I thought and whether I would recommend it or not. I'm not going to get into much detail about every single book because this is going to be a mile long of a video, but I will end up giving you my currently reading at the end of the video and the books I'm hoping to finish before the end of 2018. In 2018, I read a total of 12 books, which I know is not a lot, but I am kind of a slow reader and I read under specific circumstances, so I can't be one of those booktubers that reads 16,000 books in 1 month. I only read like 1 or 2 a month, so that is why my wrap-up is a yearly one. Maybe next year, if I manage to read more, I would do it every 6 months or something. The first book that I read is called Hard to Be a God, and it's by Russian brother authors Boris and Arkady Strugatsky, and it is, I believe it's a sci-fi. I think it's considered a classic. It is a very old book, a very interesting concept, a very interesting take on the Socialist Party and regime, and my review on this one was not great. I did not enjoy this book. It was interesting, it had some interesting ideas. Altogether, I gave it around 2 stars, and it was not worth it for me. The next book that I read is A Darker Shade of Magic, book 1 by Victoria E. Schwab. I think it's considered a fantasy, and it's about magic and traveling between worlds, parallel universes. And did I mention magic? I mentioned magic. I gave this book 4 stars. It is very popular here on BookTube. You've probably heard it a million times. It's not my favorite book, but I definitely enjoyed it. And I would recommend you read it if you like magic and parallel universes and stuff like that. The next book that I read is called Genesis by Bernard Beckett. I just realized that the author's name is Bernard, and in Westworld, the main character's name was Bernard. Genesis is a very interesting book. It's a short and easy read. I think it's considered a sci-fi. It has some interesting philosophical ideas represented in it and debates, and it became easily one of my most favorite books, not just of the year but of all time, and I really enjoyed it. I can't say much about what it is about because I will end up spoiling it, and the ending is kind of the whole point of the book. So if you like thinking about life and what makes you human, and you also enjoy some sci-fi elements in your books, then I definitely recommend you pick this one up. The next book is The Coincidence Makers by Yoav Bloom. I think I'm saying that right, I'm not sure. This became my all-time favorite book of all time, not just this year. This was just an amazing book. It was beautiful. It was just beautiful. That's the best word that I can find to describe it. It tells the story of these 3 people, Guy, Emily, and Eric, who are coincidence makers. What that means is that they make certain events happen from behind the scenes, and they kind of pull the strings of different people's lives, making certain events happen. That is the premise of the story, but there's so much more. It's one of those books that you read and you find out these new things and more with each reread, and it was just a very interesting concept. I will be doing a separate review video just on this book because I think it's that much worth it. The next book that I read is Mass Effect Nexus Uprising by Jason Hugh, I think. Yep. And it is, I think, the first book in the Andromeda series, and it takes place sometime before the 4th game, Mass Effect Andromeda. I like this book. I haven't read any of the Mass Effect books. I really love the games. I'm a big fan of the games, and I've never read any of the books before, and this one was an interesting one. It is definitely, I think, different from the other ones, at least as far as I know, just because it's a prequel to a game, so there were some limitations in terms of story, but it was interesting. And I think oh, by the way, it's a sci-fi. I don't think I mentioned that, but it's definitely a sci-fi, and my rating for it was 3 stars. The next book that I read is again a sci-fi, and it is called Nexus by Scott Reinken. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Again, I don't know how to pronounce names. So this one was another 3-star read for me. It is the first book in the Nexus triad. It's a trilogy about these young people from all different backgrounds, races, and religions who are recruited onto a spaceship and embark on a journey to an alien planet where they're supposed to work for this certain organization and mine a very special material called Nexus. That's all I'm going to say. The book was very interesting. I definitely had some beef with it, and I had some moments that I did not quite enjoy, but I am still continuing on with the series, and I did enjoy my time reading it. The next book I read is again a tiny book, and I think the translation would be I Want You to Know. It is by author Christoph von Caraway or Caraway, I'm not sure. And I gave this one 2 stars. This is kind of a contemporary, but not exactly. It tells the story of this guy who dated this woman, and they broke up some time ago, and this book is basically his letter to her about their relationship and about their breakup. It was an interesting concept, and I managed to relate to it on a very personal level, which I can't say for most people that read the books, and I would not recommend it purely for that. I did enjoy it for the first part, and then at the end not so much, but it has a cat on the cover. So the next book that I read is called The Time Machine, and it's by H.G. Wells. It is a sci-fi, I think it's a sci-fi about this scientist that travels into the future and meets the future humans, I think. And this was easily one of the worst books that I've read. Not the worst, but the writing was phenomenal. I absolutely adored the writing style. It was a little hard to get into sometimes, and also in the beginning because English is not my first language, and I did find myself struggling from time to time, but the writing style was phenomenal. The story, however, was incredibly boring. It was one of the most boring books that I've ever read. I struggled just finishing it, and I think it was like 100 pages, if not even that, maybe like 90. And I know that it's a classic, so maybe I should recommend it just purely based on that, but I did not enjoy it. So if you have similar tastes to me, then I do not recommend the book. I ended up not even rating it just because I didn't want to be embarrassed. Just because, I don't know, it's such a classic that I feel kind of guilty rating it 1 star or 2 stars. The next book that I finished as an audiobook, and it is called The Great Hunt by Robert Jordan. It is the second book in the Wheel of Time series, and I really enjoyed it. The audiobook quality on this book is simply amazing. I absolutely love them. It is a high fantasy, and I gave it 4 stars, mostly because 5 stars is for the first book, and the first book I absolutely loved. The second book, however, I struggled a tiny little bit just because it was very slow to get into. So it was kind of slow all throughout the beginning and the middle, and then at the end it kind of sped up, and I felt like the pacing was not very good in this particular one, but maybe that's just my opinion. Either way, I really enjoyed this book, and I gave it 4 stars, and I will be continuing on with the series. The next book that I read is Children of Blood and Bone by Tony Adeyemi, and if you've been on... There was a weird noise just now. So it's by Tony Adeyemi. It is a fantasy, I believe, and I gave it 5 stars. This book was really amazing. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. I just loved it basically, and I think it's the first one in a trilogy that's called Legacy of Orisha. I had some issues with one of the characters in the book that made me just want to rip out some pages, but altogether it was an amazing book. And if you love magic and magic systems and world building and immersing yourself in unknown cultures and mythology and all that stuff, I definitely recommend you pick this book up. The last book that I finished in 2018, I actually finished a few days ago, and it is called If Cats Disappeared from the World. It's by Genki Kawamura, I think, and he is a Japanese author. I absolutely love this book. Again, small and easy to read book. It is I think a mystical contemporary. I don't know. I don't even know what genre this is, but it's basically about this guy who lives in Japan with his cat, and he finds out that he's about to die, and he gets visited by the devil, who makes him an offer. For every one thing that he makes disappear from the entire world, he's going to grant him one more day of life. And basically it's a story that explores how much is your life worth, what you've done to make it worth that much, and whatever you give up, is it worth it? And when you give it up, what do you gain? And when you give up and stuff like that. It's a very interesting concept. It has a very distinct sense of humor. It's definitely not as heavy as it sounds. Even though it deals with some heavy topics, it's definitely not heavy in itself. It's actually very light and has a lot of humor in it. And also, and maybe in the ending is a little heartwarming and heartbreaking at the same time, but it's lovely. It had me in tears. So those were all the books that I finished in 2018, and now I'm going to give you a quick update on what I am currently reading and hoping to finish by the end of this year. Currently I am listening to one audiobook, and that is Golden Sun by Pierce Brown. It is the second book in the Uprising trilogy, and I absolutely love the first one. The first book is a sci-fi about humans that are living on Mars, and our main character, who is a very lower class miner who discovers that he's been lied to his entire life, and basically sets off on a mission to destroy the ones that have enslaved his people. So it sounds very vague, and it also sounds very cliche, but trust me, it is not. It has some space battles, some incredible technology. It's just amazing. Currently I am somewhere in the middle of the second book, and I am quite enjoying myself. The next book I am currently reading, but only reading while I'm at work and I don't have much to do, is Orphans of the Sky by Robert Heinlein. And this one I found at a kind of like a used books place, and it was like $2, so I had to buy it. It's a sci-fi about humanity that is living on this giant spaceship, and they've been traveling to a new planet, but thousands of years have passed, generations have changed, and people have forgotten why they're on this spaceship and what exactly is their mission. It's a very interesting concept. I think it's a very old book as well. So far I am enjoying it. It's definitely not one of my favorite books, but it is interesting to read about. The next book that I have currently DNF'd, but will start up again at some point when I feel like it, and that is Keeper of Lost Things by Ruth Hogan. And I think I picked this up when I wasn't in the mood for a contemporary story. At least I think it's a contemporary story. So far I think I'm at about 20%. I didn't quite get into it. Hopefully I will in some more time. Basically it's about this old man who collects lost things. He has also like a young caretaker or something like that, and he entrusts her with those things and trying to find whom those things belong to. So it's an interesting concept, but unfortunately I didn't get into it quite as much, at least for now. Hopefully I will next year and I'll be able to finish it. And the last book that I am currently reading is Nebula Unleashed, which is part 2 in a Nexus triad by Scott Reinken. And I already spoke about the first book, so this is the second book. And I'm not going to say anything about it because I don't want to spoil the first one. But I am very much enjoying it so far. I think I'm at about 40% in, and I'm really enjoying it. That's it from me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Comment down below what you've read this year, or if you have any opinions about the books that I've read. Also, what are you currently reading? Hopefully next year I will read even more books and I'll be able to make even more wrap-ups and TBRs and such. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!